Okay, folks. So you're very welcome. You're very welcome to our seventh product elevation meetup of the year. Where has the time gone? If this is your first time with us, you're very welcome. My name is David Denham, and we are Product Elevation. So we're a community for product and UX people based out of Dublin in Ireland, but very much live across the world this evening. So today we're taking a UX focus, and really delighted to be joined by one of the gurus, and I think probably one of my heroes in the subjects of usability design and research. But before we start, I'd like to just get a sense. I think Alison added it to the chat before we kicked off. Just want to get a sense of where you're joining us from today. So we would invite you, just using the link in the chat, so it's tiny.cc/product elevation, just to tag your location. So let us know where you're joining us from today. Let's have a look. All right, brilliant. So I see a few there already. Wow. Okay, so we're fairly spread out. So I see some folks in the UK. You're very welcome. Looks like Malaga as well. You're very welcome. From Rio. Excellent. From Austin, Texas. Yeah, I know it's early for you guys, so I really appreciate you joining us. Where else? Massachusetts in USA as well. You're very welcome. So just give everyone a few more seconds, just to tag your location, where you joined us from today. Hopefully we have one or two from Ireland, and I'm not the only one. Let's just give it a few more seconds. Okay, yeah, I see Ireland as well. Yeah, so Dublin, that's great. You're very welcome. All right, see three around Texas, so that's great. Let's give another 5 seconds. Okay, great. So it looks like we're fairly spread out across time zones. So again, you're very welcome. Thanks so much again for choosing to spend your time with us today. So just a couple of points before we kick off, and I hand over to our speaker from today. First, just want to start as usual with thank you. So thank you to our partners in Skills Matter, particularly to Alison and Anika, for all your coordination and technical help and everything to help our to make today's meetup possible. And thank you to all of you guys for spending your time with us today as well. The world is still a bit of a crazy place at the moment, so hope you're all keeping well, most importantly. Okay. Just a quick look as well in terms of what we have next. So we have our Product Elevation 2021 conference coming up in the middle of next month, so the 18th and 19th of November. I'm really excited. We've pretty much built out our schedule now. So 37 speakers, so including the likes of John Cutler, Grace Hughes, who's quite well known in the UX community here in Ireland, like Barry O'Reilly, Ala Weinberg, Adam Thomas, Jason Knight, and lots more. So head on over to productelevation.org to find out more details. Just as by way of a little thank you as well, we do have a 20% off code there for you guys if you'd like to join. So we'd love to see you there. Okay, great. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we started working in the field of usability and user experience in 1978, before the terms usability and UX were ever associated with computers. While he led UIE, the industry research firm he started in 1988, the field of UX design emerged, and he helped define what makes UX designers successful all over the world. He's the co-author of Web Usability, and you'll find his writing at uie.com. He also tweets daily about UX design, design strategy, design education, and the wondrous customer service habits of the airline industry. So it's an honor and a privilege to have him join us today to speak at Product Elevation. Ladies and gents, pleased to introduce Jared Spool.
Hello. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today. It is an honor to be talking to this group and being part of your regular sessions. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. The what I thought I'd talk about today is this idea of UX metrics and sort of the power of finding UX metrics that really work for you. And what I've been learning over the last decade or so is that we don't do measurement really well. We don't really measure the right things. We tend to focus on the instruments we have instead of the things we need to learn. And so today I thought we'd talk a bit about uh, metrics. And the place I thought we would start is uh, uh, people are often talking to me about these things they're being asked to measure, things like net promoter score, or uh, satisfaction surveys, or uh, various types of um, uh, analytics that come in, and they're saying, well, are these the right ones I should be using? And the question that I often need to ask is, well, what is it that you want to know? And they often don't have an answer, which is really interesting. It's like, well, I'm just being told I need to present something, and this comes up quite a bit. I was recently talking to someone who said, "Look, my senior management just wants a number. They want something." Or somebody else recently said to me, "I have to do OKRs. I have to do my objectives and key results, and I need something to report in that." And almost always, the things that they pick are just sort of these almost random numbers, things that they know they could report, but they have this sinking feeling in their chest that they are not the right things to be measuring. And so I thought I'd talk today about, well, what could we measure, and what does make sense. And to do that, I want to do this as a the way I want to structure the session day is, instead of for me talking for a long time and then opening it up for questions, I would rather you ask questions as we go, and we'll just sort of stop and take questions along the way, and let you drive what this is. So let me sort of introduce this idea of UX metrics and how I see them, and how they can be helpful. And so to start, what I want to do is I want to look at uh, the this notion of metrics that are um, uh, basically uh, helping us understand what's actually happening with our users. So we can think of, if we take apart this idea of UX, right? So when we talk about UX, what we're really talking about is a user's experience. And uh, the key word here is experience, right? We can think of an experience in terms of a series of events that happens in the user's world, in the user's life, right? And so these happen on a time frame. So this is linear. That's important, right? Time is moving forward for most people. That's how it works. And so so we have this linear process, and over this period of time, there are a bunch of milestones. These are things that happen. Some of these are going to involve our product or service. Some of them are not going to involve our product or service. But this is what's happening in the day of one of our users, and we can measure this experience in terms of a scale that goes from extreme frustration to extreme delight. And in the process of measuring this experience, we can say, well, let's say someone is trying to, I don't know, find a hotel room on our hotel website. Uh, we can see that some piece of that process might be delightful. They find the hotel and it looks like the rooms are awesome. So then they want to find out if the room will meet their needs, and the description's not very good. So that becomes a little frustrating. And then they decide anyways that they're going to go for that room, and they say, okay, start my booking, and that works out. But then in the process of filling out the booking, there are all these questions, and they don't understand how to answer the questions, or they're getting error messages about spaces or characters in their phone number. Maybe the credit card isn't validating properly. But then, at the end, they get through it, and now they're able to make the booking, and then they get a confirmation note, but maybe the confirmation note isn't clear. So now that's frustrating again, right? So we have all these moments, some of which are delightful and some of which are frustrating. And we can start to look at these frustrating moments, and we can ask ourselves, well, how would we make them less frustrating? How would we do that? And from a design standpoint, we can think of UX design as basically saying, okay, well, how would we make these moments be less frustrating? How would we get it to be delightful all the way across? We can think of this as an aspirational UX versus the current experience. And so any idea of how we're going to measure this has to start with our understanding of what this area of improvement is. And because if we can understand where we're going to make things better, we can understand what we want to measure. And to do that, we can think of measurement as a well, let's define some terms here. So the first term I wanted to define is measurement. And a measurement is simply a change or state that we can observe. And the example I find myself using these days is I've got this doorway in my house, and when my kids were little, I would just take them and have them stand in front of the doorway, and I would take a little marker and I would just draw a line. And then as my kids got bigger, uh, uh, I would draw another line and another line, and another line, and I could observe the change of their height over time, and that's a measurement, right? It doesn't have to be more sophisticated than that. Whereas a metric is basically measurements that we track. And this is important because we don't track everything we can measure. I was only tracking my kids' height. What I wasn't tracking was, for example, how many fingers they had on their hand, because that didn't actually change over the duration of their life. Similarly, or at least not yet, I didn't track the distance between the top of their index finger and the bottom of their wrist. I could have tracked that. I could see that changed, but I didn't track that. And because I didn't track it, it's not a metric that I was paying attention to. There's another term here, which is analytic. And an analytic, at least in the tech term, analytics means something different, for example, in finance. But an analytic in text is basically measurements that computers can track. And this is important because computers track a subset of all the metrics that we can track, which are a subset of all the measurements we can make. So the analytics are a subset. It turns out there are a very small set of things that we can measure, and it turns out that most of the time they're the wrong things to measure. So um, the analytics are basically a a trap that people fall into. We often do this thing of saying, what is it that we can measure, and let's figure out what analytics we have, and then let's pick one for our OKRs or whatever it is that we're going to use our metrics for. And that's the wrong approach. Where we want to start is with the measurement. We want to start with this idea of what is the change that we want to see in the world. And that change is going to be the thing that we should measure. And then let's figure out how we track that measurement over time so that we can make whatever prediction we want to make. So, given this, I'll take some questions in a minute. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them in. And David or Allison, if you can let me know when we have a question, that'll be fantastic. But this idea of a measurement, we have to sort of start with understanding the difference between an output and an outcome. An output is basically something we deliver. Okay. And that thing that we deliver is, it could be, shipping a design. It could be producing some amount of code. It could be creating wireframes or running some sort of research study. It's just things that we deliver, and we can count them. We can say, okay, we've done 4 of these, and we can use that as some sort of number that we report back to the powers that be to say, hey, look, we did our job. We did 4 of these in just under a few weeks, and boom, aren't we awesome? But the problem with outputs is that they have no notion of quality. Right? We don't know if the things that we delivered are any good. We don't know if they're useful at all. So there's no quality attribute of an output. It's just, we did a thing, it got done, we're all set. But when we talk in terms of outcomes are basically the change in the world that we want to see, right? So this is the outcome is, if we deliver this thing, if we do a good job shipping this code, what's the change that we want to see? We might want to see people using it. We might want to see people benefiting from it. What would that change be? And if we can figure out how to observe that change, we can then make a metric out of that. Right? Because we can measure the change that we observe, and then we can track that change over time. Now, there's a particular type of outcome that I'm fond of. And that's what I would call a UX outcome. And a UX outcome basically answers the question, if we do a great job, again, UX is talking about the user's experience. So if we do a great job, how do we improve? Because we don't want to make things worse. How do we improve someone's life? Because remember, at some level, the user experience is just a sequence of things that happens in somebody's life. So we're trying to improve their life. We're trying to get from this frustrating bit in their life to this more aspirational moment in their life. And so moving from this, from this idea of measuring outputs of things that we count, right? We've shipped 4 features. Let's talk about the outcomes from those features. If we did a great job on those features, how do we improve someone's life by putting that into the world? So that's the basic idea. And we start with that as our key metric. So if we're thinking in terms of objectives and key results, for example, it's just one way to put together some sort of goals and tracking. The objectives become our UX outcome, right? From a UX standpoint, the objective, which is supposed to be something that is aspirational, something that is very much a big goal, we choose the UX outcome. So, for example, if we're producing a system for our hotel reservations, we'd love it if the users could get enough information about the rooms that they feel like they're making the right choices, and they could get through the check-in process with without getting any error messages telling them they've done it wrong, and they could get through they could get a confirmation note that gives them all the information about where the hotel is and where it's supposed to, when they're supposed to show up, and what the check-in time, and answers all their questions. We can identify what those things are, and we can say, okay, we can make UX outcomes about each of these things, and we can turn those into measures. We have succeeded when we have reached this level of our aspirational user experience. So that's the starting point for our any sort of UX metrics, is to start with an outcome and go from there. David, I see that you have a question. So why don't we start with your question, and then we'll come back and I'll continue, and we'll look for other questions.
So thanks, Jared. Yeah, so I think the first question was for me. So how do you avoid having very laggy metrics? So kind of lagging metrics versus towards more leading indicators, or kind of more short-term trending metrics?
Oh, that's a great question. The trick is that we want to look at the change that happens as it happens. So you may be right. Some changes take a while to happen, but almost always with lagging indicators, there are predecessor indicators that show us that the lagging indicator could happen. So do you have an example of a lagging indicator that you might be thinking of?
Yeah. So maybe something like, for an e-commerce site, something like sales or bookings or something like that. That might be more kind of an impact type result.
So the way that we do with e-commerce sites, and this is a great question. E-commerce sites turn out to be easier than lots of other sites. But the way that we deal with e-commerce sites is we watch people shop. And when people don't buy something and you're watching them shop, it becomes pretty clear why they're not buying. Right? You can see why they didn't buy. You can talk to them about why they didn't buy. A while back, we were watching people shop. This was way back when e-commerce was still a bit new, and one of the first sites that sold office supplies and office equipment, they were having all this problem with people abandoning their checkout, and they didn't know why. So we were watching the people shop. So we would actually go out and we'd find people who needed office supplies and equipment, and we would spend time watching them actually shop for the things they needed, right? So we weren't asking them to pretend to buy something. This turns out to be really key in e-commerce. You can't ask people to pretend to buy things, because when they pretend to buy things, they don't actually behave the same as when they're really buying something that's important. And we had this one participant in our study who wanted to buy a $2,500 color printer, this big ass laser printer that he wanted. And he was excited about buying it from the site that we were studying, because they'd actually offered it at like $50 less than every place else he'd seen it. So he was really excited about buying this thing. And he told us this. He said, "Oh my gosh, this is a great price. I've been keeping my eye on this printer. This is exactly the printer I want. I'm definitely going to buy this printer." And so he starts through the checkout process, and he puts in his shipping information, and he puts in his billing information, and it's asked him to put in his credit card, and he stops dead. I'm like, "What's going on?" And he says, I'm not ready to make a purchase here. It's like, why not? Now, the company had seen a whole bunch of people in their analytics. They'd seen people dropping off at this point, and they thought, oh, people don't trust us. So they had put all this stuff on the screen that said, trust us, trust us, trust us. We're completely safe. And that didn't change any of their statistics. And they upgraded their security, and that didn't change anything. So they were completely fixated that this had something to do with trust. And so I was expecting this moment, and I'm like, "Do you trust these folks?" And he says, "No." I said, "Why not?" He says, "They haven't told me what the shipping is going to cost." Now, mind you, this $2,500 printer, it weighed, some massive amount of it was this heavy, massive printer, and he figured that it was going to be another few $100s to actually pay for the shipping of this really heavy printer. And so he was not going to put in his credit card number until he knew what the shipping was, and nothing on that page told him that. And so he abandoned the sale. Now, had he continued the sale, he would have found out on the next page what the shipping really cost before he actually confirmed the purchase. But he was of the belief that once you type in your credit card number, that's where the confirmation happens. And he was absolutely of the belief that it was going to cost him a ton for shipping, which in fact it would not, because it was more than $25 purchase. And so those two things he didn't know from the site. And so it was a fairly straightforward fix to tell him that A, purchases over $25 have free shipping, and B, what the shipping would have cost before he put in the credit card number, or that would come on the next page and he wouldn't be obligated to finish the purchase. Right? But they didn't know that information.
Mm.
So you have to start by watching people. And then you can figure out what the change you want to see is. And this is the big mistake that a lot of people make, is that the lagging indicator of sales is because they are not paying enough attention to know what the inline indicators are that tell you right up front what the problem is. Does that make sense, David?
That definitely makes sense. I like how you called it that, kind of observe what they're actually doing. I know my last place we had a term, I think it was called "follow me home,"
Right.
for that type of observations. So yeah, it makes total sense. And I think until you actually see it in action, you're kind of making those assumptions.
Exactly. And this is where folks get into trouble, is that they don't do enough research. So much of our work is extra work that we do compensating for the fact that we haven't done enough research to actually find out how people are using the things we've built.
Absolutely.
And so this is a key piece. You can't create good metrics without doing the research up front to find out what that current experience is like. And then from there, you can pick the outcomes and go from there.
Makes
It
sense.
seems we have another question.
We do indeed, yes. So we're just going to put that up on the screen. We'd love to hear how you go about measuring something like delight in an experience. Maybe SUS score, NPS can be affected by so many outside factors. Thanks for the question.
Right. So there's lots of ways to measure. Remember, what we're looking at here is not absolute delight, but relative delight. Right? The way to think of experience is to think of it on a scale of currently feeling frustrated or currently feeling delighted. But what we're really looking for is the change between frustration and delight, right? So the way that we move. So we don't usually need to worry about this, because if we're spending time with our users, they tell us whether they're frustrated or delighted. So this is a fairly straight thing, right? We can see that they're getting frustrated. Now, there's a trick that I use that has worked for me when I'm able to be next to folks. It's a little harder to do online, but the way the trick works is I let me go to a blank sheet here. I draw a little scale. And I put a happy face on one side and a sad face on the other. And what I do with this scale is I take out a coin and I put it in the middle of the scale. And then I ask the participant, when I'm doing my research, I ask the participant, is the coin in the right place? And what you'll see is they'll move it in one direction or the other. And so, how are you feeling right now? Is the coin in the right place? And they'll sort of move it over here. And then as we progress from one part of the experience to the next, I'll keep asking them, is the coin in the right place? And they'll go, yeah, or they'll go, no, or they'll go, or they'll go, uh-huh. And they'll just keep moving it around. And I can start to use that as a very simple form, a very crude mechanism for tracking over time where the dots want to be, and then I can connect them up. And here's an advanced pro tip. The person who I give in a session, who I give the responsibility of actually drawing this graph in real time based on where that coin is usually the highest paid person in the room, because if I get them to draw dots where it's frustrating, they come out of the session going, "Oh my God, we need to fix this. We need this to be much better. Why is that so frustrating? I don't want to have to draw those dots there anymore." So that turns out to be where we end up focusing, because that is key. I want to talk before we take another question. I want to talk about a couple other things here. So we start with these UX outcomes. They're the objectives. What goes into the key results? Well, it turns out that in the key results, we can put some what we call success metrics. So UX success metrics and UX progress metrics. So think of this like a marathon race. So a marathon race is, you know, is basically this, 26-mile race. But what's that in kilometers? That's, 42 kilometers, right? So we've got this race of, and there's a finish line. And we're gonna go and run this race from the starting point to the finish line. Well, the finish line is the key outcome that we're seeking here, right? The change in the world that we're looking for is I have run a marathon race. And so our success metric becomes the exact moment that I've crossed over the finish line. This is success. Anything before this, not success. So success we can think of as almost like a binary measure, right? We've either succeeded or we haven't. And that happens at the moment we cross the finish line. So our UX outcome, the improvement that we want to see in the world, the moment we see that improvement, that's success. The progress metric, those are based on milestones that happen along the way. And the milestones that we cross, those mile markers that we're crossing there, those are basically telling us the progress we make. This is halfway. This is a quarter of the way. This is 3/4 of the way, and we have our finish. And so these are what we call progress metrics. Now, we can't establish progress metrics until we establish success metrics. We have to know what success looks like. And as a metric, it means it's a tracked measurement, and it means that it is the change in the world that we want to see. So the moment we cross the finish line, that's success. That's the change that we want to see. Progress metrics then become the changes that we want to see to tell us that we're on our way to our success metric. So in that regard, the key results become our progress metrics. And we use progress metrics to tell us where we're going. Now, what the progress metrics are, they're going to be based on the success metric that we use to tell that we have achieved the outcome. And it's going to be different for every product, every service, for every type of outcome that we have. Remember that the outcome answers the question, if we do a great job, how do we improve someone's life? So we're looking at the improvement. The moment we can detect that, that's our success metric. And we're keeping it very human centered because we're focused on improving the life of somebody. And so by looking at that, we now get to this idea that we can put progress metrics that say, okay, we've, maybe our metric, if we think of this in the marathon race idea, maybe these are distances towards the race, right? I'm at the halfway point of the race. I'm 3/4 of the way through the race. And boom, I finally make it to the end and I cross the finish line. But another way we could do this is we could talk in terms of training for the race, right? So I have a friend who is working her way to becoming a marathon runner, but she just started. And so she just completed her first 5K. And that is sort of, here in her journey. She needs to be able to do 5Ks without walking pieces of it. So that's going to be key. And then eventually she needs to be able to do 10Ks. And then eventually she needs to be able to be able to do 20Ks. And she has to work her way up to 42Ks. So she's going to do that one piece at a time. And so she's measuring progress in terms of her training regimen. So our key results could be broken down in terms of the training regimen that we are going to use to achieve the outcome. In OKRs, it's best to keep the objective the same and to constantly upgrade your key results as you make progress. And so when we're looking at UX metrics, we focus on the improvement in someone's life, and then we ask ourselves, okay, what are the things we expect to see? So if we go back to our original sort of journey here of this e-commerce where booking our hotel, we had problems with the product description. Maybe that's one of our key results. We get that working the way we want. And then we had problems with the checkout process. So maybe we get that the way we want. And then we had this problem with the confirmation letter. So maybe we get that the way we want. And those all become our milestones of progress on our way to our UX outcome, which is if we do a great job on that booking experience, people will feel like they are going to have a great vacation without having to fret over the details that we messed up in the experience that we gave them. And that's how I think of metrics for user experience. This idea that what we want to do is build out this long-term thinking of what's that finish line that we're going for and how do we break it up into small pieces. So, David, do we have another question here?
We do indeed. So next question for Jared. Any advice for when and where to review outcome metrics and with whom as well?
Yeah, so you want to be doing this with your team, right? You want to get everybody involved. You want to get the product people and the development people and senior management. You want all of them involved in the process of first committing to the outcome, right? Because if you don't have commitment on what the finish line is, then what race are you running? If people aren't in agreement as to what the finish line is, you're just running in a random direction. So we need to understand what the change in the world is that indicates that we have finished. And once we get agreement and alignment on that, then the next step is to start to break that down and say, well, how would we detect that? How would we measure that? Remember, we want to start with what we're measuring first, not with the instruments by which we'll measure something. So we may have to start by measuring by just going and watching people do things. But that's okay. We can do that. If we can observe today that people have trouble with the booking system, then we can observe tomorrow that those troubles have gone away. And so we can watch people. We don't use sampling as effectively as we could in a lot of measurement. We think that everything has to be 100% data collection, and it doesn't. And in fact, 100% data collection is impossible to achieve. Most of the data we get is crap, but we don't know that. We're just letting the computers feed us crap, and then we complain. So we need to be bringing that data in. So we start by getting alignment on the outcomes. Then we get alignment on how we're going to measure, and then we get alignment on the data as it comes in. And when we have that, we have clarity of what the metrics are and how we're making people's lives better.
That was great. I think I like what you call it there, and because sometimes an anti-pattern I would see is we start with how we're going to measure it, and we're almost constraining ourselves with, you know, what's easy to measure, like
Exactly.
what tooling do we have, but actually starting with that clear goal and kind of working backwards
Yeah.
from there. Yeah.
And we constantly pick these measurement tools that are really ineffective. So for example, someone before mentioned SUS and NPS. And both of those things, SUS is the system usability score. SUS is horrible. It was built in the 1990s to measure 1990s pre-web technology. It wasn't very good then, and it's worse today because it's got this outdated language. It makes no sense. It is a completely useless measure, but people gravitate to it because it's already built, right? And it's sort of like you've we're just grabbing a measuring cup out of the kitchen, and we're trying to measure our life's worth with it. And it's like, yeah, I've got this measuring cup. Figure out how to put your life's worth in that. I'm like, what does that even mean? And so these tools are not very good. Net Promoter Score, another horrible tool that actually doesn't measure what it pretends to measure. So none of that is particularly good. So instead, we need to start with the measurement. What do we want to learn, and then go from there.
That's great. Thanks, Jared. I see a couple more questions coming in. So again, folks, if you do have questions, please type them into the Q&A panel. So we put the next one up. How do you go about creating specific outcome-based metrics? So for example, do you host workshops with the team? So this seems to be kind of around that kind of formulation of these metrics. Do you have any methods you could share that work well?
Yes. So actually, we're hosting a workshop on November 8th that where we're going to train the trainer on how to run these workshops. We're calling it Persuasive UX Metrics, and the way that you build these workshops is basically you get people in the room, and the first thing you need to talk about is the outcome that you're going to have. But to keep in mind that the outcome, the way that we think about this, right, is we have the UX outcome. That's what we're trying to shoot for. That's our improvement that we're going to get over time. And the place we need to start is with the current experience. So what I've learned is outcomes are really easy if we have a lot of understanding of the current experience. If we don't, as a group, understand the current experience well, outcomes are really hard to get alignment on because everybody's got an opinion, but nobody has data. So we need to get the data, right? And the data is basically collecting up a lot of these understanding charts of what we see when we watch people really using the system and looking for those patterns where there are things that happen across people's experiences that turn out to be key. Now, we can't just go from the current experience to the improvement because there's obstacles to that. What we need to understand is whatever's preventing the improvement from happening today, those are problems that we have to solve. And once we understand what the problems are, that comes out of the current experience. We say, okay, why can't they get the improvement today? We don't just go from the problems to the outcomes. We actually create some solutions. These are the features that we build and the capabilities that we put into the system. And it's those features that are going to help us get the outcome, hopefully. But they might not, because we don't understand the problems enough. But if we do our job well, if putting out the solution doesn't get the outcome, well, we've just learned more about the problem. And when we talk about iterating in design, iterating is actually happening here. So that's the basic model of this. So in our workshops, we usually start with the current experience. And we go from the current experience and we say, okay, what problems are there? What solutions could there be? And then we ask ourselves, what would the outcomes be if we did those solutions well? That's how we get to the outcomes. So that's the thinking behind how those workshops work. And we're going to, in that session, our persuasive UX metrics session that we're talking about on November 8th, the week of the 8th through the 15th, we're gonna talk about all of that there.
Perfect. Thanks, Jared. And I think Alison has posted a link to that session into the chat as well, if anyone's interested. Okay, this is a good one. What are your thoughts on the Google Heart framework as a means to measure user experience, Jared?
Well, the Google Heart framework doesn't measure anything. The Google Heart framework is just a way to understand if you have all the right things for measuring user experience. So a key thing to point out is that the Google Heart framework doesn't tell you what to measure. It just gives you categories of things to measure, right? And Heart stands for happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. And the problem with Heart is that it is really not a good balanced framework. It is very business oriented, right? For one, none of the things here are meaningfully measured, right? Happiness is not a particularly useful measure of anything, and the metrics for the measurements for happiness are very crude and very difficult, and we're always sort of trying to adopt things that don't really measure whether somebody's happy or not over to this. Engagement, again, is not everybody needs things to be engaging. In fact, engagement is not a very particularly good term for things. Adoption makes sense, but again, these are all business oriented, right? None of these are focused on the experience the user's having. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today's going to be a good day. I'm going to adopt 3 products. None of that makes sense. Today's going to be a fantastic day. I'm going to boost 4 companies' retention metrics. These are not the outcomes. These are measuring at best outputs, and they don't do it very well. So I'm not a fan of the Heart framework because I don't think it directs us to looking at the right metrics. I think we want to start with, if we do a good job, how do we make somebody's life better? We don't need a framework for this, right? It's a simple question. If Google did a good job with search results, with some change they're making to search results, what would make somebody's life better? If they did a good job with making email with whatever changes they're planning to email, how would they make somebody's life better? Well, you have to know what the changes are. You have to know why you're making them. You have to have done the research to understand what the problems are that you're trying to fix. Hell, I would like Google Calendar to actually work. I would like Google Calendar to make it easy for me to share my calendar with my coworkers and actually make it so that I don't get double booked for meetings. Right? My life would be dramatically better if we fixed calendars. But that, the heart framework doesn't get me to actually fixing calendars in my life. Right? That's not about adoption. It's not about engagement. It's not about retention. It's not about task success. It's about my general frustration that I spend a lot of time communicating to people saying, are you available at this time? Are you available at that time? Can we find a time where you and I can work? Right? This is the key issue, right? This stuff is just really, really difficult, and we need to really understand the problems before and the current experience before we can put together any sort of metric of are we succeeding. And so my issue with the heart framework is that it focuses us all on the wrong things. It starts with these sort of random metrics. It's going for the instrument before we know what problem we're trying to actually find out if we've changed the world, right? We need to figure out what the change in the world we want is, and then find how will we observe that change, and then build measurements and then instruments around that.
Yeah,
It's
that makes
tackling the
sense.
problem in the wrong direction.
That makes sense. And again, whoever asked that question, if you have any follow-up questions, please add them in the chat as well. It sounds like it went back to one of those previous questions as well around starting with that goal and kind of working backwards rather than starting with a framework. Jared, we have one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think that's the last one we'll take for tonight. So thanks again, folks, for all your questions. Another big one. What's your opinion about jobs to be done?
I have lots of feels about jobs to be done. I'm okay with it. I don't think it's anything remarkable. I dislike the notion of reducing everything to a job because it's incredibly transactional. What's the job of running a marathon? And there's a lot wrapped up in why somebody wants to run a marathon. I mean, somebody could be running a marathon because someone else is chasing them, and that's what it'll take to get them to stop chasing them. But that's probably not the reason they're running. It's not a transactional thing, and many things we do in life are not transactional. Uh, but the thing about jobs to be done that seems to be working is it gets people to move beyond thinking about the output of delivering a feature and more about what is the person's experience with that feature. And if we can get that to be to happen, jobs to be done seems like a good mechanism to get there. And so I'm okay with that element of it. One of the problems with jobs to be done is it's promoted by a handful of consultants, each of whom have come up with this sort of branded methodology for doing the process correct. None of their methodologies wow me. They're basically bad UX experiences. If you just meet someone who's a good UX person and has a lot of great UX skills, you'll get much better methods than you get from the consultants who sell jobs to be done for a living. Somehow jobs to be done became this consultant-based methodology. And of course, there's like 3 or 4 different consultants selling this thing, and each one of them have a completely different methodology and get to different types of endpoints, and none of them produce amazing results. So I'm not excited about people who get all religious about jobs to be done, but the idea that you want to ask the question, what is somebody going to use this thing for? That's great. I don't hire my coffee maker. I don't fire my coffee maker. So that's a stupid anthropomorphism. But what do I need my coffee maker to do for me? That's an interesting question. And does it have all the things I need it to do? I have a tea kettle that has different temperatures on it because different teas require different temperatures. And uh, uh, and the thing is that I only ever drink black tea. So I don't need it to do anything other than boil the water. So, what do I need all that stuff for?
Thanks, Jared. It kind of brings me back to, I remember a quote from John Cutler. He talks about kind of leading with the why and not the way. And, when I hear some of these frameworks, heart or jobs to be done, sometimes there's that danger of leading with the way rather than, what are we trying to solve? So again,
Exactly.
thanks very much for that question as well. So folks, I think we're just out of time. That's after flying in that hour, Jared. So thanks so much. That was a really interactive format. I think it's the first time we've had that particular format at our meetup. So really appreciate it. That was super super useful and super informative. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're here. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm JM Spool on Twitter. You can also connect up with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out and connect up. And of course, I'd love to see you at our Ecometrics event in November.
Excellent, cool. And the link for that, folks, is in the chat again if you're interested. And Jared, listen, we hope to see you in Dublin at some stage in person. We'd love to
I
get you
am
over.
excited about the opportunity to get on an airplane and come to Dublin at some point. I'm not excited to get on airplanes today, so I'm staying here in my bunker until I can get on an airplane with confidence that I'm not going to come off the airplane sicker than I started it.
I hear you. I hear you. I think you mentioned you like black tea. We do nice black tea here, and also some
Yes.
other nice black black beverages as well. So, so please God, in the not too distant
Irish
future, anyway.
breakfast tea is one of my favorites.
Excellent. So, folks, thanks so much again. First of all, again, huge thank you to Jared. Huge, I suppose, virtual round of applause to Jared. Thanks so much again for sharing your expertise. And thanks again, folks, to all the questions. It was really good. I think we could have gone on for a while longer with those. And yeah, just in terms of what's up next, just a reminder: Product Elevation 2021, 18th and 19th of November. Super excited about it. Hope to see you all there, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, folks. Had a good evening.